Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to talk about John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, published in 1937. This is my third John Steinbeck's, one of John Steinbeck's novels, my third book by John Steinbeck, and it was my last one. It was the last book that I read in 2017, and it is my second favorite right now. So it's Grapes of Wrath, Of Mice and Men, and The Pearl. This book is, I mentioned this before, I don't understand why people don't like Steinbeck. People say that he uses visual imagery and it's just too much, and I don't think that's possible, but okay. He's depressing, life's depressing, you should know that. And they're traumatized, people are traumatized because apparently it's very common for you to read Of Mice and Men in high schools or secondary schools. In America. I don't know if that happens in the UK or is it the other way around. I'm not sure. And after reading the book, okay, I'll grant you that it is a complicated book and maybe it's a bit too much for the 16-year-olds and the 17-year-olds and all that, but I don't think that's a good enough reason for you to give up on him, because he really is an amazing writer and there are so many other things that you can read by Steinbeck, and I think it will change your mind if you just give him a shot. Of Mice and Men is a novella like The Pearl, and it follows two men, George and Lenny. George is a short, he's sort of intellectual but uneducated due to his background and his social status. He didn't have the opportunities others did. And Lenny is a very tall, large fella, and you have this idea, but you don't really know what it is. But you know that Lenny is mentally ill or incapable. He struggles with social situations. He wants to be friends with everybody, and he really trusts people. And he doesn't understand why people are so mean to each other. So he sometimes struggles in social contexts. He focuses and obsesses over tiny details. There are many passages in the book when George is trying to explain something to him and Lenny is focused on one detail and that's it. He's just gonna ask stuff about that, and George really has to try to be patient, and he can't most of the times, but he tries to guide Lenny towards what he wants him to remember. He doesn't understand things, he has to memorize things. So he memorizes rules, he memorizes George orders, but I don't think he really understands them, why he has to do that. But because he trusted George, he does what he wants and he does what he tells him. We're not really sure about their connection, but it is mentioned that Lenny's aunt died and George promised her he would take care of him, and that's why everywhere he goes, Lenny goes too. Which is difficult because George is trying to get a land and just be his own boss. He wants to cut the cord and leave all of orders and follow someone else's orders and have to work for someone else and not have anything of his. So possessions and property. And Lenny makes it difficult because he always has to pay attention to Lenny, who is always getting into trouble, and George sometimes gets into trouble as well because he's trying to help him. So it is very difficult for George to be happy with his life, because he's not really living it. He's living Lenny's life, and he's trying to keep Lenny out of trouble, probably from himself. I think the concept of the American dream is very present here, because there's this hope of amounting something, and George really, he has every reason in the world to give this idea up. He has every reason, and no one could blame him if he just one day woke up and said, well, I'm just going to stop thinking about this. I'm just going to do my work. I'm just going to live my life like it is now. It's not that bad. Because having to deal with Lenny is very complicated. And I actually read how people in the 1930s, we treat those who were mentally ill, considered mentally ill, and most of the times they will end up in institutions, and those institutions didn't treat them very well. And I think George, it would be easier for him to just leave Lenny at a place like that, because if he did, in a very short time, George would get his land and just live his life, and no one would upset him and pester him with questions and obsessions and all that. But he really can't. Not only because he made a promise, but also because I think he knows that deep down Lenny would not survive in a place like that. So he has every reason to give up, and he has every reason to be mean and leave Lenny behind, but he just can't. So there's this refreshing idea of, the light at the end of the tunnel. There's hope. And yeah, I think that's what really makes the American dream so powerful and so present in stories like this. Another thing that I think it's very easy to spot, but there's a lot you can say about it, is the theme of loneliness. So I think there's 3 ways to look at it. First, you have Lenny, who, even though wants to be friends with everybody, has this really childlike personality. So again, refreshing. You have this hope. And even though he's like this, he still struggles with different social contexts. So I kind of think that he feels lonely at some point, because he knows that he's not his own person. He has to follow George's, advice and rules and orders, because he knows that if he doesn't, he'll get into trouble and he won't know how to get out of it. On the other hand, you have all the men working in the farm, including George, who get along just fine, but at the same time, they don't trust each other. And I think that's something very natural in our lives, because when we reach adulthood, we don't really trust one another, do we? So yeah, we're all together, but I'm here, you're there, let's skip the distance. We get along just fine, but I'm my own person, you're your own person, so I don't want you to know what I'm planning on doing with my life, because you are going to try and steal that away from me. So there's no sense of trust. Whereas Lenny trusts everybody, the others don't trust anyone. And then you have that idea within the second option, the second perspective. You have that moment where every single one of them feels lonely on their own. So they are surrounded by people. They work with each other every day. They have to sleep in the same room with different bunk beds or whatever, and they have to sleep there. And so they are together all the time. And I think that it's not always, but it's like when you're at a party and you have a lot of people surrounding you, and there's like this short moment. You just feel sad. I don't know if you have this, but I think it's very natural to happen. It's just, you have this short moment and you're happy and you're laughing, and then you just, because people stop talking, or the something that made everybody laugh stopped or ended, and there's that slight moment of losing something, and you realize that you are alone when you are surrounded by people. And I think that's what happens with every man at that farm. So besides not trusting each other, and they live for themselves. And I think George is he's very connected with himself. I think he accepts that he doesn't trust people, and that he doesn't trust people because of Lenny, because he knows that Lenny might get into trouble if they get too close with others. But at the same time, even if he could trust someone, even with Lenny, and he trusts Lenny. I think at the same time he feels alone, and that is not living his life to its full potential because of him. So everything is very connected, and I really believe that this, even though it is a very short novella, I think you can easily find things to discuss. For example, the idea of a godlike figure when we analyze George, because of the way he protects and he tries to help Lenny. He just wants Lenny to be free, be completely free and okay with himself. And you have this weight on his shoulders. George has to carry that on his shoulders all the time, and there is a connection there with maybe a sacred figure, a godlike figure, and I think that's a lot to put on someone's shoulders. So I think that's why he holds on to that hope of getting out of that place and finding his place in the world, and through property, so owning a land and growing vegetables and fruit and having farm animals and just be his own boss. I think that's why he keeps that, and he keeps it through everything. So there are many situations throughout the book, towards the end, that would be good enough reasons for him to just, okay, let's put that idea on standby right now and focus on this. But he never does it. He always has that present until the very, very last minute. And after I read the book, I always wonder, what happened to this character? What happened to that character? And I don't know if George was able to live with himself after what happened. I'd like to know your opinion on this, but I wonder. And I'm not saying that he wasn't able to achieve it. I just think that he doesn't want it, or like he didn't want it. Why continue with this? I mean, it's not bringing me any happiness. He didn't bring any happiness to anyone. Let's just forget about it. Move on. I don't know if this is the idea that you have about George. Someone's having a party. I don't know if you can hear that. Yeah, do you think about that? What do you think happened to him? Do you think he got the land? Do you think he gave up? Do you think he could live with himself? Do you think he continued on living? Just to finish this off, yeah, Steinbeck did it again, so I'm not disappointed. I was really scared to read this book because so many people talk trash about this book, and I was just really scared that my idea of Steinbeck would change. No, not at all. So my next video, I'm hoping I'll make it like really soon, because right now I'm on vacation. I'm on holiday until the first week of February, and it will be about Haruki Murakami's Sputnik Sweetheart, my 4th Murakami book. I got 2 new ones, yay! And I really want to talk about that one. That's another one that I was really scared to read, and I don't really know why, because after I read it, again, I don't get most of the reviews out there about the book. I don't get it. I just think I'm really different. So I hope you had, great Christmas, New Year's and all that. I hope you made your New Year's resolutions. I always have mine. I always have a list. And I'll see you on my next video. Bye.